Okay, I'm back. This video, I guess we'll file it on the playlist of my language learning journey or my Japanese language learning journey, but it's both. It's going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to show you some books that I'm using to study Japanese and also two books that I'm using for Latin. So there's that at the end. But for now, as I'm in my grammar study phase of my plan. I don't know if I put the video out. Yeah, I think I put already the video out where I show you my 7-month plan to become a low level speaker, a low fluency level speaker of Japanese, basically of any language. It's like it's a plan that I've outlined. And right now I'm in the 5th week of that plan, and the 5th, 6th, and 7th weeks are the grammar, one of the grammar phases where I just do primarily focus on grammar and a little bit on gaining a little vocabulary. Anyway, this video is in the way of like giving you an update of what I've come across and what I've learned. Okay, you have to take this, you have to take what I say with a grain of salt, because I am, again, a 5th week student of Japanese, basically. I don't know, I don't speak the language. I'm not a native in any way in Japanese. I'm not even an intermediate level speaker in Japanese. And by the way, I'm only learning the Romaji. But anyway, you could study Romaji. You can learn grammar through the Romaji. I don't think that's a big deal. But I don't have comprehensive knowledge. So things that like seem right to me now, maybe if I knew more, they wouldn't seem so right to me. But so I'm open, like, and I welcome criticism and corrections if you know. But either way, I'm gonna give you what I have found so far. Um, a lot of this is attributed to the YouTuber and author that went by the name of Cure Dolly. She's passed away. Which to me, she was the best. She was the best, my best resource. Explained Japanese grammar in ways that made it accessible to me. But I have other sources that I use in keeping with the advice of a couple of polyglots, I think on YouTube, that recommended. I forget one in particular. I forget his name. That's terrible. I think it's like he's well known. I think it's Arguelles. I forget, but he has like an academy. He has it's like an Arguelles Academy online, famous polyglot, and yeah, like I don't remember how many languages he speaks. But anyway, he recommended that you use a lot of sources to learn your grammar. So I have like various textbooks, and so I do. Anyway, so here we go. Let's go into the curious grammar of Japanese. So in order to facilitate, so my goal is to form sentences in Japanese. My goal is to be able to like make my own sentences, to express my thoughts, like impromptu, extemporaneously, like ad hoc, like not rehearsed, right? Not greetings, not like konnichiwa, o genki desu ka, o genki desu, oyasumi nasai, like not greetings. I know greetings, but I want to go to the next level. And so I think grammar is going to actually like be the key here, into being able to expand my abilities speaking wise in Japanese. Not, but I still have to put in the time to speak, obviously, but the grammar is going to have to be there at some point. Okay, so here we go. Enough. So I thought the one way is like, so I need to learn the verbs, and like if there are like key categories that Japanese sentences fall into, and if it's like a small number, like, so you have a nice, neat way of understanding Japanese grammar in general, that would help. And I found that generally to be true. So by the way, some of this text on the screen that you're going to see is a lot of what like ChatGPT responses. Some of it is going to be what I got from books, and I just transcribed it onto my computer. And some of it is slightly my own stuff, my own thoughts, my own twist on what I've been learning. So then it's going to be mine. Anyway, so in Japanese, predicates form the core of sentences and are classified into 3 main types. So nice. 3 main types of predicates, right? The predicate, so English sentences are also divided into subject and predicate. The subject and all the words that correspond to the subject, and then everything, basically the verb and everything that corresponds to the verb. right? So everything that's not the subject basically is the predicate, and the major word in the predicate is the verb, right, in English. So that's how we divide it, right? So the subject and what we're saying about the subject, basically. Okay, so Japanese divides it into three main types. So, okay, let's learn those three main types. One is a verbal predicate, where the key word in that predicate is just a regular verb, right? Like run, read, sleep, fight, right? So, and so let's look at the verbal predicate. Let's look at the example here. Example, hon o yomu. So just simple, this is the book, and then this is the direct object particle. So that means that's what you're reading. And so yomo means read. And there is no subject stated here. Japanese will omit the subjects, even more so than a language like Spanish, which also omits subjects because it's an inflected language and the verb tells me the subject, basically. But Japanese, the verb doesn't tell me the subject. Yomu could be I read, you read, he reads, she reads. So Japanese is highly contextual to your environment, your physical environment, like who you're talking to, who is around you, what was said earlier, right? Things that you know about each other sometimes. That will tell you what the person speaking means, whether he means I read books, whether he means I read a book, or she reads a book, or they read book, or they read a book, right? So anyway, so we just care about the structure. So yomu here is the key word here I put in red. It is the verb. It means read. So that's it. This is an example of a verbal predicate, and yomu is the key distinctive word here in that predicate. Okay, let's go to the next one, which is going to be more useful to us. 2 and 3 are going to be more useful. Adjectival predicate. Adjectival predicate. Japanese is commonly divides, or people commonly divide Japanese adjectives into I adjectives and na adjectives. The I adjectives end in AI, II, OI, or UI. They don't end in EI. EI words in Japanese are generally nouns. So, and these I adjectives, these so-called, or not so-called, but these I adjectives can be used just like our adjectives to modify a noun, and they go directly in front of the noun, or they can go at the end. But in Japanese, they can go at the end of the sentence to be the entire predicate, right? So they have verbal aspects to them because they can be the predicate, and if it's a predicate, it has to have some kind of verbal aspect to it. So let's look at the example. Kono eiga wa furui. Kono eiga wa. Kono means this. It's an adjective, not a pronoun. And eiga is movie. So this movie, wa means it's the topic. Okay, so it's not the subject, it's the topic. But in the absence of a something ga, in the absence of some noun and then the particle ga, which ga marks the subject, then we are to understand, again, given context, and here we have no context, so that the topic is the subject. So ego wa means my topic is this movie, and it's also going to be the subject. So what you're saying is going to be, true of the subject, which is not stated, but the topic is stated, and it's going to be the same. Anyway, so furui is old. Furui, by the way, can only be used for things, not for people, I think. But it doesn't matter. The important part is that you have this I adjective, furui. It's the entire predicate, and it can be because it has a verbal aspect to it. Japanese I adjectives have a verbal aspect to it that English adjectives generally don't, right? Okay, so this movie is old. So this is a very important, this is very important to understand about I adjectives, that they can be just predicates on themselves. So the one way to understand them is that they mean not old, but they mean is old. The verbal aspect is inherent in this type of word in Japanese, in the I adjectives of Japanese. The verbal aspect is inherent. So then I can just use it as a predicate. It can be my complete predicate. And here in this sentence, it is the complete predicate. Okay, let's go to number 3, the nominal predicate. And this is the one we're all familiar with when you use like des, right? Like watashi wa Carlos des, right? I am Carlos. Watashi wa Perujin des. I am Peruvian, right? Kore wa pen desu. This is a pen, right? So this is the X is Y type statements. And in Japanese, it uses the X, Y, whatever the thing is, and then des, right? So this is a nominal predicate because you have the des, which is the predicate, but it carries, it's attached to the noun. So that's the nominal predicate. That's what they call the nominal predicate. So here, Isha is a noun, and Isha means doctor. But Isha by itself cannot be the predicate because there's no verbal aspect to Isha. It's just a plain, simple noun, like our word doctor, right? So now it doesn't mean doctor, like our word doctor can also be a verb, right? Like she doctored the document, right? So, but here we're just talking about the person doctor. So Isha doctor. So because it cannot be a predicate on its own, it needs the copula des, right? The copula just joins basically nouns together and makes identity statements or description statements. So here, kare wa, he, kare is he. As for him, kare wa, the topic, as for him, and then we don't state he, but it's also going to be part of the logic of the sentence. As for him, he is a doctor, or just he is a doctor. Okay, so this is the third predicate. I mean, the third type of predicate. We have a noun with des to give it the verbal aspect. By the way, ishe da is the same. These two sentences are the same. This is just a more polite form than da. Da is more like a casual, informal form. It's not rude given in the right context. Like if you're talking to your friends, it's it's perfectly acceptable to say kare wa isha da. In fact, it might be preferable than to speak in the polite form to your friends. Okay, but so they mean the same thing. And it's important because we're going to come back to this da later to understand the na-adjectives. So notice I haven't spoken about na-adjectives yet, but I will later. And it's kind of what I learned through my studies here. Okay, so that's it. So the isha da, the isha des or isha da is a nominal predicate, and its predicate, it can only be a predicate because of the des, because that gives it the verbal aspect to it. Okay, that's it. That's the first thing I learned, or that's one of the things that I learned that I thought was important. The three kinds of predicates in Japanese, we can divide all sentences into one of these categories. Beautiful, nice, right? Easy, 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 easy. Okay, now let's go to now. Now let's look at a curious case and a comparison. I want to compare two sentences together because there's something that I learned in regard to these two sentences, and I think it's going to help students of Japanese. Let's start with the first sentence. Kono eiga wa furui. We saw that furui can be the predicate entirely. It means is old. And so here it does mean the same thing. It means is old, right? Okay, so what is kono eiga wa? Kono eiga wa means this this movie, right? This movie. Kono eiga is this movie. And we're saying this movie is old, right? That's it. This movie is old. Kono eiga wa furui. And it's an adjectival predicate sentence because the I adjective is working as the predicate, right? So we understand this is simple to understand. So if we can break it down by saying kono is the demonstrative adjective, not pronoun, adjective, because it's modifying this noun, and that's what adjectives do. Eiga is movie. The wa is the topic marker, right? You can kind of follow along down here. The wa is the topic marker, and the furui is the verb-like adjective, and because it has verb-like qualities, it can be our predicate. Okay, that's it. So furui, again, it's very important that I want to drive this point home that furui here, it means is old. It doesn't just mean old. It means is old. Okay, so that's it, right? Furui, adjectival predicate, meaning it can have it has verb-like qualities. Okay, now let's compare this sentence, this independent clause, it's a complete sentence, a complete thought, to the next sentence. And I'll leave it together so you can see. Kono eiga wa furui no desu. Notice that we have the exact complete sentence embedded, so to speak, into the second sentence. But we added two extra words, no desu. Like if this means this movie is old, and we know des basically is just a copula meaning is or are or am, what is it that we're saying here? Like, how can we say this movie is old and then on top of that throw in another verb, is? This movie is old because no is just a particle, so no, it doesn't add any extra meaning. Like it doesn't, we're not we're not adding an extra word here, like with a semantic meaning here, right? So kono ega wa furui no desu. Like, how is it that we can say this here? How is it that we are attaching this? What is no doing? And so this is what I want to explain. What no is doing is actually it's working on furui. Furui is a verbal adjective, right? It's a verbal adjective. It's an adjectival predicate. In when it's used in this context, it's an adjectival predicate. What's doing is taking this and making it into a noun, right? So just think of example like the word beautiful, and you turn that into a noun. Well, beautiful. The noun of beautiful is beauty, right? So then now it's no longer beautiful. Now it's beauty, right? And another way you could think about turning it into a noun is just add the word thing. So instead of beautiful, it's a beautiful thing. So that would also be a noun, to be a noun phrase, right? So one way to think about what no is doing, and I'm not saying Japanese translates into like if you put thing, that's the best way to translate it, but it will give you an idea of what's happening in the grammar, what's happening in the grammar. So just think of the no as adding the word thing to this adjective, and now you don't have an adjective, you have a noun phrase where the adjective just modifies the noun. So kono ega wa furui no desu. And the reason why we need this is because we've turned the verbal adjective furui into a noun, and the noun has no verbal aspect to it. So we need a verb in our predicate, and so now we need this because now furui has lost its verbal aspect. Once we put no into there, once we attach no to furui, we took away the verbal aspect of furui, and so now we need a verb for our predicate, and that's this. Okay, so if we and I'll say more about this no here. So again, if we go down the line here, kono is a demonstrative adjective. Again, not pronoun because it's modifying ega. Ega is a noun meaning movie. Wa is the topic marker. And in the absence of a subject marker or a subject with a subject marker, we know that this is also going to be the subject of our sentence. And furui no. So now because we're saying it means old thing, so we can think of it as an old thing. So kono ega wa, this movie, an old thing, and then is. So this movie is an old thing. That's one way to understand the sentence, but the grammar, it's a good way to understand the grammar, right? So this movie is an old thing. That's what the no does. So here we go down here. And of course, the more nuanced translation would be this movie is old. Or when we take like translation liberties, we would just say this movie is old. And by the way, this one also just meant this movie is old. They both mean the exact same thing, but this one has a slightly different connotation to it, and we'll talk about it. So what is the no doing? The no is called a nominalizer. A nominalizer is just something that turns things into nouns, right? It's like a shredder, right? A shredder turns things into shreds. A nominalizer turns things into nouns. So in this case, as you can see, this is the ChatGPT definition. The no is used to turn an adjective or verb or an adjectival verb into a noun, or to add emphasis, or to do both, right? And here in our sentence, it's going to do both. In this case, it nominalizes, meaning it turns this adjective furui into a noun-like phrase that refers to the state of being old. Okay, or again, you could just think of it as adding the word thing, an old thing. That is a noun phrase, right? That is a noun phrase. So yeah, okay. So what we learned from this is that furui by itself is an adjectival, it's a adjectival predicate. It can be at the end of the sentence. It's just like a verb with a adjective meaning to it, right? So it's a verb-like adjective at the end. But once we stick no in front of it, we turn this adjectival predicate, we turn this verb-like adjective into a noun-like adjective, meaning it has no verb-like qualities. So now we actually need the des in order to make a predicate, in order to have is an old thing. Otherwise, without the des, we just have old thing, and we have nothing to connect the kono ega, right? We have nothing to connect the old movie or the movie or this movie to an old thing. And so we need the des to make that connection. And so this will form our predicate. So all this forms our predicate. Okay. I'm out of breath. I'm talking too fast. Okay, so this is our nominal predicate because again, this is just like the doctor des. Here we just have this noun phrase des. This is the same grammar. One was a pure noun. I already forget the word for doctor. And then and then furui no is just a noun phrase. So same grammar. So it makes sense. It all makes sense if we understand sentences like this, right? X Y, right? X Y and then Y des. The word for doctor is the word for doctor. It's bugging me now. Isha. Okay, so here the Isha can play this role, right? This role in this construction, right? Kore wa, he is, or as for him, kore wa, as for him, Isha des, right? Is a doctor, right? Is a doctor, right? And furui no can play the same role, right? Kono eiga wa, this movie, furui no des, is an old thing, right? So that's why it fits. Now, and so why am I talking about this no? Why am I talking about this no? One, it helps us understand, I think, an important part of Japanese grammar. But two, today, when people speak, it's very common for them to not use no. It's very common for this no to not be stated. Then if you're learning how to speak Japanese and you are saying kono eiga wa furui desu to mean this movie is old, it's perfectly fine, right? Whatever Japanese evolves to, whatever like is colloquial, it's correct. But if you're learning Japanese and you're trying to understand the grammar and you're just reading this, like this should cause you some hesitation or some pause and thinking like, how can I add the word des? When if this means this movie is old, how can I just add another verb to the entire sentence and still have a grammatically correct sentence? And the reason why is because they are not saying the no, but logically it must be there. Grammatically, the grammatical logic of it is that there's a no there, and you should understand that. Okay, but like, yeah, you're probably going to hear now people just say something like kono eiga wa furui desu to say this movie is old. And so what's the difference between this sentence and this sentence? And like I said, and like the ChatGPT tells us, we can add emphasis by doing this. And so here the explanation is, and I'll put it down here, I'll just read it. Kono eiga wa furui no desu can be translated as this is old, but with a nuance that emphasizes the condition or state described by furui no. It's a more detailed way of stating that the item is old, often implying a bit more emphasis on the quality or condition of it being old, right? So you're emphasizing the fact that it's old. That's it. So that's the only difference in these two sentences. They both say this movie is old, but here, like, the emphasis is on old. Like, man, this is old. Like kind of like if you something that way and verbally you would emphasize. Okay, so that's it. So I think important to understand. It tells us something about the adjectives. It tells us something about like these kinds of constructions when the no is not there. And it can tells us what the no is doing, right, grammatically to the furui, to this adjective, which allows it to become now a nominal predicate sentence and not an adjectival predicate sentence, right? This is the number 3 type here because of the no, and then allows the des to connect those two nouns or noun phrases, whereas the first one is just an adjectival ending with furui. Okay, I hope that made sense. And I hope I'm not saying anything wrong. I do not want to misguide you guys. I do a little bit of my due diligence to make sure, well, not to make sure, but to try to be careful about that, giving you any kind of wrong scoop. Okay, now let's go to the last thing. The so-called na-adjectives. The so-called na-adjectives, as Kiyodali explains, are not adjectives at all. They're not adjectives. So what are they? Okay, so to get at a little bit in a roundabout way about what are they, let me give you some other grammar, and then it's not going to be that long, but you'll see the connection soon. Let's take a sentence like this: Hana wa kirei da. By the way, this could just be des. It doesn't matter, but I use da because it's going to help us make with a connection. So hana wa kirei da. Hana wa kirei da means the flower is beautiful. Hana is the flower, and wa is the topic particle. And again, in the absence of a ga statement, we can assume here that hana is also the subject of our sentence. So hana wa kirei da. Kirei is, now kirei da here is traditionally thought of as, the kire thought of as an adjective meaning beautiful. And it's thought of as a na-adjective, right? It's thought of as a na-adjective. But notice that kire ends with an ei, by the way. We already know that these are not adjectives. EI words are not adjectives. They're reserved almost exclusively for nouns. And here, we also see the des, right? The da, the copula. The copula joins one noun to another noun phrase here, right? If it were just an adjective, it were just a regular adjective, we wouldn't need the da. So the da is joining the hana wa to the kire. So the best thing to think about the kire is that it's a noun. And so the best thing to think about kire is that it means beautiful thing, because it's a noun, right? So a noun phrase. So the one way to understand this sentence is to think of it as a flower is a beautiful thing. And this will help explain what the work of the da is doing to join these two constructions, this noun phrase construction with this noun phrase construction, right? And that's what the copula does. That's what the copula does in Japanese. That's what the copula does in Japanese. Okay. So what's happening with the na adjectives, and now we'll go to the second sentence here, or here's the na as a modifier right before the noun that it modifies. And because it's a na adjective, we have the na, kirei na hana, right? Kirei na hana. So all that's happening is that this da, right, this da, this copula becomes a na, which allows this noun to be adjectival, which allows this noun to be adjectival. So let me give you an example in English. I bought a bicycle. Okay, so here we can just break down, we can say that bicycle is a noun and it's the direct object, right? But it's a noun, right? Pure noun. But I went to the bicycle shop. Here, bicycle is an adjective because it's modifying adjective, because it's modifying shop. So we can also think of it as an adjectival noun, right? But it is a pure adjective. It's an adjective because it's functioning as an adjective, and that's how words get their that's how words are identified, by their roles in the sentence. So if something is working as an adjective, it's an adjective, right? If normally we think of it as a noun, it doesn't matter, right? Bicycle in like the dictionary, or just like we just think of a bicycle, we think, oh, this physical thing, so it's a noun. But we can use the word bicycle in this expression bicycle shop, and so here it's doing adjectival work, so it's an adjective. So we just call it an adjectival. So this is what I mean by an adjectival noun, right? In English, notice that we don't make any changes to this. In Japanese, what they would do is they would put na. Kire, this would be whatever the word for bicycle is, jitensha. So jitensha na. Now I'm not saying jitensha is a na, so-called na adjective. I think it's not. I think you cannot use it that way. But this construction is the same construction as the kire na. The only difference is that kire has a meaning of beautiful, or a connotation of beautiful, where obviously jitensha has a meaning of bicycle. It's a different kind of thing. Like, okay, so that's what's happening here in the kire na hana construction. The da that you need to connect this noun to this noun, you can do that with kire if you put na in front, between it and the noun you're modifying. But it's still kind of a noun, but it's just an adjectival noun. It's a noun that can be used like an adjective, just like our words, just like our nouns can be used without any kind of special grammatical feature like a particle na, right? We can also turn nouns into adjectives by making them possessive, right? The bicycle's tires are flat. Well, what is bicycles? That's an adjective, right? It's a possessive noun, but it's modifying tires, which is my noun. So this is an adjective. Bicycles apostrophe s here is bicycle apostrophe s here is an adjective, right? So in English, we're very familiar with this idea of using nouns as adjectives. But in Japanese, that's what the so-called na-adjectives are. They are nouns that are being used adjectively, right? And the na is what allows that to happen. Okay, so let's see another example. Heya wa shizuka da. Heya wa shizuka da. Heya is the room, like a room that you would like walk into, like a living room, bedroom, whatever. Room, and then shizuka da, quiet. Now, quiet, when we translate it into English, just looks like a regular adjective to us, right? Okay, but here shizuka is also a noun. So again, I think the best way to think about this is to think that grammatically, at least, but translation-wise, is a quiet. The room is a quiet thing, right? Kind of like grammatically to understand what's happening here. But the translation-wise, yeah, the room is quiet is the perfectly good translation. Okay. All right. So now let's go to the second one. Shizuka na heya. That's all we did. We just put the na to make this noun adjectival, right? Same thing. Now let's look at another one. Suki. Suki is a little bit different kind of I adjective. Suki na neko. Suki means kind of like, normally it's defined as like or fond of or likable. So that's the kind of meaning. If you look in the dictionary, you will find this kind of meaning for suki. Suki here. So suki na. So how can it mean favorite cats? Like how can it mean favorite cats? Okay, so because if cats, what you're saying is that the cats are favorable. Favorable to who? Favorable to me. Oh, okay. So you like cats. Yay. So this one translation of Suki na Neko, a perfectly good translation is favorite cats. It's probably not the only translation, but that's a perfectly good translation of Suki na Neko. Let's look at Suki in a sentence. Neko ga Suki da. Ga here is the subject marker. So now we're saying the subject, and the subject is doing something, right? The subject is the one that's doing something. We don't have a we don't, right? So there are no passive verbs in Japanese, by the way. Another thing that Kyodale teaches you. If you watch your videos, you'll learn this. But we don't need to worry about that to understand what's happening here. The subject is the cat or the cats. By the way, Japanese neko is singular and plural. Beautiful. Like you have one word for singular and plural. Beautiful. Okay, not like Spanish. You would have a singular cat for masculine, plural cat for masculine, singular cat for feminine, plural cat for feminine. And if you think Spanish are, then in Latin, you'd have singular for the 6 cases, plural for the 6 cases. If you do Finnish, you have 14 or 15 cases for the singular, 15 cases for the plural. So that's 30 ways of spelling cat, depending on how you're using it in a sentence. 30 ways. If you study Finnish, you have to know the 30 ways that cat can be spelled, depending on the one of 30 ways that it can be used in the sentence. One of 15 ways, but because you have singular and plural, you have to account for both kinds of spellings. In Japanese, there's only one spelling versus Finnish, 30 spellings. So beautiful, beautiful. Neko, cat, I love it. So suki, neko ga suki da. So what is it that suki? If suki here is our predicate, and da just means is, really. So what is suki here if it's our predicate? If it's our, what is the verbal aspect of it? And how can the translation be, I like cats? First of all, you're nowhere in this sentence, right? The watashi wa could be, is understood, by the way, but that's the topic. We have the subject, neko ga. It's not like I'm saying watashi wa perujin desu. Watashi wa perujin desu. I'm not saying what the subject is, so it's understand that it's watashi. Because in the absence of a subject predicate, or in the absence of a subject construction, we can assume that the topic is the subject. So when I say watashi, and then I don't say anything ga, then what I'm saying is about myself, and I'm saying the subject is me also. So watashi wa Perujin, this means I am Peruvian. Here we have a subject. So even if the topic is watashi wa, which it is, by the way, watashi wa, so we can all put it in. It's understood, but it's not stated. But context will make it that it's so. Watashi wa neko ga suki da. We can speak this way, by the way. And when you learn Japanese, I would advise you speak in this verbal, robotic AI textbook manner. So no, I think it's good for your learning of the grammar and comprehension of the grammar. And then later you can trim off stuff to be sound more native. Anyway, so watashi wa neko ga suki da is translated as I like cats. How is that happening? Because the suki has a different function. Like it does. So what we're saying is cats are likable. Cats are likable. Well, if cats are likable, who are they likable to? To whom are they likable? Well, to the topic, watashi wa. So one way to understand is that cats, as for me, as for myself, to me, cats are likable things. Cats are likable things. Oh, you mean you like cats? Yes, cats are likable things, right? So it's the same thing. It's just somebody's using very stilted English to say, I like cats. Like, imagine like you're some kind of like pedantic, snooty Harvard professor, and they're like, yes, cats are likable things to me. You mean you like cats? Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, why you talk that way, idiot? Anyway, so yeah, so that's all that's happening here. The sukida is saying that the subject is doing this thing and it's doing it basically to you. It's a likable thing to you, right? Okay, so that's why we get the translation of I like cats. Okay, so again, adjective, noun with adjectival qualities because of the na. All right, that is the lesson. Those are the lessons that I've been able to elicit from the videos I've watched and the books that I've been reading. I tend to think that I have a pretty solid understanding of what's happening here. Like if there were some kind of like logical leaps that I'm taking, like I would like sense that. Like I don't think I'm like, again, I could be wrong. I'm not like, that's obviously always on the table because given the stage that I'm in my language study for Japanese. But as I learn stuff, I like to be very thorough and I like to like fully understand it. And then when I think I know the machinery, when I think I know all the parts are working, like I feel very confident like that I understand it. And so that's what I'm bringing to you. Okay. With the qualification that, yeah, I could be wrong. And in that case, I really, really, really welcome corrections. I'm not adverse to criticism. Like criticize me all you want. If one, it has no effect on me. Two, it's mostly just going to be beneficial to me. So I will appreciate it. Like I don't care if you're like sarcastic or derogatory towards me or just like a nasty tone or just whatever, right? It doesn't affect me. You're not gonna phase me one iota. Okay, now let's get into the last thing. And let me turn off the stop sharing part so you can see my big mug. But most importantly, so you can see the books. Actually, that's not a good idea. Actually, it is. Let me just show it to you. Let's start with the Latin text. This book, which I know you cannot read exactly, so I'll just show you. It's falling apart, by the way, but the part that I need to actually, it's good that it's actually falling apart because I'll show you. So this, can you see this? Let me do like this. So this is Collar and Daniel's first year Latin. Collar and Daniel's first year Latin. Maybe like this is better. And this book was published in 1901. So you are up to date because Latin is a dead language. So long before 1901. So old book. I'll tell you the positive qualities about this book. Self-learners, I recommend. I highly recommend for self-learners this book. Instead of the more popular, the more widely used Wheelock's Latin grammar. Who, by the way, which I have and which I learned my Latin from, long forgotten now. And it's very good, I think, in a classroom setting. When you have a teacher to explain things, and by the way, if you had the full key for all of the answers, that would be glorious. Like I really, that's one of my pet peeves is language books, textbooks with a bunch of exercises that don't give me the keys. Or like I gotta buy the key separately. Really? I gotta buy the key separately. You couldn't have included that. Like that's, yeah. Shame on these publishers. Anyway, so like I said, one of the some of the virtues of this book is that it's good for self-learners. So why is it good for self-learners? Because it doesn't bombard you with vocabulary every unit. It gives it to you in small doses, so then you are able to like memorize maybe 10 words in Latin. That's doable. Like I can do that in like 20 minutes, and just short term, just enough to like, okay, this means this means this. Let me do the reading. Oh, okay, I remember this. I remember this. Oh, you'll forget it in like a day or two, but it doesn't matter. For the purpose of doing the exercises, for the purpose of translating, or just reading Latin, or learning like the constructions, the 10 to 15 words is good. It's like that's good. And then you get sentences, and then so you're getting Latin sentences, the English equivalent, and it's limited vocabulary. So you're able to implement the grammar that you're being taught. Okay. So piecemeal grammar. But if you are one of those people who don't want to get like for example, the word puella. Puella in Latin is a first declension noun. It's a ending noun. Most first declension nouns are feminine. Puella is feminine because it means girl, so it's going to be feminine anyway, even if it wasn't spelled with an A, because it means girl. Anyway, so puella for Latin, we basically run down 6 different cases, right? The nominative case, the genitive case, the dative case, the accusative case, the ablative case, and the vocative case. They're sometimes called the locative case, but for now, generally, when you learn Latin, you're learning the 6 cases, and you have to learn the singular version and the plural version. So for puella, the singular in the order of the cases that I mentioned is puella, puellai, puellai, puellam, puella, puella. And then in the plural, it's puellai, puellarum, puellis, puellas, puellis, puellai. Okay, that's so. Yeah, some of those endings are the same, but you still have to know which ones belong to which case and which number, singular or plural. So it's basically 12 different case endings for the word puella, depending on how you're using it in the sentence. And you could be using it one of 12 different ways if we include plural and singular as also a way. Okay. So if you want the whole declension for first declension, you're not going to get that. You're not going to get that. Collar and Daniel give you, for example, in the first chapter, just puella as the subject, so the nominative case. Just puella, and then in another chapter, they give you puella as the direct object, so the accusative case. And then so on like that. Now, if that bugs you, like it kind of bugs me, then you could just go to ChatGPT and say, give me the first declension chart for Latin nouns. And ChatGPT will give it to you, then you can see all of it. But as you go along, just do the exercises pertaining, to the chapters, and work through the book that way. So self-learners, good. Clear explanations, good. Limited vocabulary, good. Right? Good. Yeah. So it's just old book, but you can find it. I think you can get it for like $20, or like a printed copy, a newer copy. My book's still fine. I'm not going to pay for a new book because I can still perfectly read the pages, even though they're kind of yellow. Okay, and then the other book I have is Wheelock's Latin. Probably the most, at least in California that I know of, in the UCs, I know, even in the city colleges, I know, and probably the state schools, I know, like maybe I don't know, but probably the state schools, this is the most widely used Latin text in schools. And it's a good book, but you do really need to have a teacher, right? And here you do get, I would say, about like 20 vocabulary words per chapter. And this 7th edition, which I believe is the latest, I don't think there's an 8th yet. You see how chunky it is? If you buy, and I recommend, if you use instead the 3rd edition or the 4th edition, you will cut this book almost in half and lose no grammar. Because this book has a bunch of stuff on historical figures in Rome, certain women in Rome, certain men in Rome, the graffiti in Rome. Like, you get a bunch of cultural stuff, which like is enjoyable. I'm not saying it's worthless or like dull or not interesting, But when I want to learn the language, I basically just want the language, right? Like the cultural stuff can be like motivational. It can help you like, but like some of us need it a lot less, and I'm one of those people. If this book were cut in half, I would be happier. So I have the third edition and I have the fourth edition, and to me, both of those editions are better for my liking than this seventh edition. And I recommend it because you're also getting a little bit less vocabulary per chapter, I do believe, and to me that's a virtue. Okay, so Wheelock's Latin, it's good. It's often maligned, I think, online, but it's not a bad way to learn Latin. It's just like it really helps when you have somebody to help you along. But for self-learners, the Collar and Daniels. Okay, let's go to my Japanese texts. I have several. The first one is I mentioned this person, Kirodali. This is the book she put out, Unlocking Japanese. The subtitle is Making Japanese as Simple as It Really Is. And she does make it seem pretty simple, right? To me, I have the attitude that Japanese is not a hard language to learn grammar-wise. Like, there's a lot of it. There's a complexity to it, but it's not a difficulty in like, this is hard to wrap your head around. It's not hard to wrap your head around, but most people make it out to be something that's hard to wrap your head around. Dolly makes it so that you're like, oh, this is actually not hard. Okay, I got to put in time and effort into it, but it's not hard, right? Okay, so unlocking Japanese, but just watch her YouTube videos. Like that's a gold mine. Like yeah, that's a gold. I was gonna say literally, but obviously it can't be literally. That's a gold mine of information for language for Japanese learners. Okay, another book that I'm using because again grammar. Japanese verbs, an essential grammar of Japanese. This is by Rita L. Lampkin. Rita L. Lampkin. This again is an essential stuff. This is a lot. It breaks down the sentences. It gives you what the stem is. It gives you what the base is. It gives you what the endings is. It talks about this. It talks about the mas form, the more polite form. It talks about adjectives. So it's essential grammar, right? Essential grammar breaks down I adjectives and so-called non-adjectives, how you conjugate them, right? And the tenses in Japanese, right? The non-past and the past. The non-past is like includes the present and the future, but because they're both included, we just call the non-past normally. Okay, so essentials grammar. Like this is not a text that you really want to read through, but every once in a while, like read a few chapters. Like, oh, okay, interesting. I didn't know that, blah, blah, blah. And then like put it down and then do your other studying and then come back to this and then do another chapter. That's the way I'm using it. Okay, this old book, this Teach from Your Teach Yourself books. This is the Japanese one. This is a hard copy. This is by C.J. Dunn and S. Yanada. So I'm assuming Yanada is the last name. So Yanada-san. And who knows what the S's first name is. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, so this Teach Yourself book also is a nice, if you're familiar with the Teach Yourself books, they give you small doses of vocabulary, they give you some dialogues, they give you some grammar bits, and then they give you translation exercises. It's not a thick book, and it's not even a big book, so it's only going to take you so far, but it has nice explanations. And they've sorted out the material, they've organized the material in a way that they can teach you the language in a progressive way, building on top of what they already taught you. So this is not a bad way to go. By the way, I haven't said this. I use Romaji. So this book, by the way, is just pure Romaji. If you're looking for a book with hiragana, katakana, kanji, this is not it. This is not it, by the way. This is not it. Also here, let's go back to this. This is also just Romaji, and here she uses the Japanese text, but it's not really that kind of a book. It's not a textbook. This is kind of some pointers and some explanation of key things. So yeah, so if you're looking for a book that is like that includes at least the Japanese text, or a book that doesn't have Romaji, some people really don't want Romaji. These are not it so far. So my intentions are to speak Japanese and avoid the Japanese alphabets as much as possible. So no kanji, no katakana, and no hiragana. Although I can kind of make out some hiragana because I've studied it a little bit before, but like I gave up on that. So, and I don't see a reason to refresh what I learned before. Okay. A dictionary of basic Japanese grammar has lots of example sentences, and it kind of explains things to you. It's kind of like if you would like make a sentence in English and ask ChatGPT to translate it into Japanese, and then ask ChatGPT to explain the grammar. This is kind of what this is doing for you already. But again, it's structured and organized to help you like learn the most important things. And yeah, and I don't know, I haven't gone through all of it, but yeah, it breaks down the sentences for you. It kind of like parses the sentences for you so you can understand. Again, this is more like a reference material. I would look at this maybe once every 2 weeks only, and like look at a couple of sentences and see, but make sure I understand them fully. Not memorize them, but I understand them, so that later when I encounter other sentences like that, I kind of know what's going on, right? Okay. But to learn to speak the language, the grammar is not going to do it for you. You're going to need more to do more. And I have a plan, right? I have a plan, but part of that plan is to form my own sentences. And for that, I think I do need a lot of grammar behind me. And it's just the way I enjoy learning. So like I don't see any like detriment to my approach. It might be detrimental in the sense that I'm slowing down my ability to speak, but I don't care. As long as I'm sticking to my program, eventually I'm going to get there. I think the biggest pitfall, the biggest concern for language learning is that you just stop learning, right? So if I have a slow method, but I stick to it, that's better than your fast method that you're going to quit on, right? So, okay. Well, it doesn't mean you have to quit on it, but I'm just saying like this is helping me stick with the Japanese, so that's what I'm doing. Okay. And eventually you're gonna want to read in Japanese. Reading is one of the best ways to improve your vocabulary, right? You get the words in context. Also, it doesn't hurt to see different sentence structures, right? And this book has the Japanese text and the Romaji, both Japanese text and Romaji. This is reader volume number 1. I believe he has already 4 volumes, and he also has a separate glossary for the words encountered in those volumes, or at least he has a glossary for volumes 1 through 3, I believe. I don't know if there's a second glossary for volumes. Maybe it goes to 6. I don't know. Anyway, so this book has definitely the Japanese text, right? Does he have kanji, or is it all? No, there's kanji. It's all. I think it's just full on Japanese, and then but you're also getting. So I'll show it to you maybe, so maybe you can see. So on the left side, to me, you're getting the Japanese text. On the right side, on top, you're getting the Romaji, and right below it, you're getting the English. So Japanese text, Romaji, and English. So whatever you want, it's there. But if you're one of those people who hates to see the Romaji, well then I don't know what to tell you. Cover it up, ink it out, or just like don't buy it. Okay, but for me, it's going to be a great resource when I get to the reading phase of my program. I'm not there yet. A book that's highly recommended, and I think even Curedali recommends like using this book, not exclusively, but as like a good source, is Tai Kim's Guide to Japanese Grammar. Good explanations, good information. By the way, this book you can find free online. Just click, just Google A Guide to Japanese Grammar Tai Kim PDF. It'll pop up and you can download it. I really hate to read online because my eyes I'm online way too much as it is. I prefer a text. And even if the online didn't damage my eyes, which it does, and if it didn't tire me, which it does, I would still prefer a physical copy. But anyway, so another source. This again is not really a textbook. This is more like some pointers and some things that you should know. So it'll help you understand. It's like it'll give you a general feel for the language, and clear up some things that people tend to be misguided about. But it's not like you're going to sit down here and learn Japanese through reading through this book. Like, I wouldn't want to try to do that with this book. Okay. And now the two main sources that I'm using, the ones that I use regularly, is this one, Naganuma Naoe, First Lessons in Japanese. Self-learners. Again, Romaji. There's no Japanese here. There's no like Japanese text. It's all Romaji text. Self-learners. Why for self-learners? Very limited vocabulary each lesson. Each lesson is, by the way, 4 pages long. This book is 215 pages. It's written like 1952, something like that. And initially, you're going to get 15 Japanese sentences, and on the right, you'll get their English equivalents. But those 15 Japanese sentences only consist of about 10 Japanese words. So you're getting a lot of repetition, which is good for language acquisition. A lot of repetition in small doses. So, kore wa enpitsu desu, kore wa hon desu, kore wa kami desu, right? So you a lot of repetition. And then after you do that, after you can like, oh, okay, I've memorized this vocabulary. I know the sentence structure now, like kore wa enpitsu desu. I know the wa desu construction, or kore wa enpitsu de wa arimasen. This is not a pen. This is not a pencil, right? Kore wa enpitsu deshita. This was a pen. So, right. So after you learn these constructions, because you're seeing them over and over again, in the same unit, by the way, you're going to get more vocabulary. And with that more vocabulary, now that you know how the grammar works, you're giving English sentences. And your job is to translate them into Japanese. And meaning, your job is to implement the grammar that you should have learned through the 15 sentences that you studied. And you're not getting the same. You're getting new vocabulary, because otherwise you'd just be making those same sentences again, right? Because he's giving you the same grammar, so he can't really give you new sentences. So you're getting new vocabulary. Again, maybe like eight more words. And with those 8 more words, you're being asked to generate these new sentences from the English. But they're going to be the same format as the 15 you got earlier, but it's going to employ new vocabulary. And that will test whether you understand the structures, the grammar structures that you've been given. And that's all it's doing. It's doing this for 50 chapters. It's doing this for 50 chapters. And so it's very incremental, small doses, lots of repetition, which is a boon. It's a boon. It's a virtue. It's a good thing. People like saying repetition is bad. It's a great thing for learning languages, especially on your own. So it can get a bit tedious. It can get a bit monotonous, because it's the same pattern. It's like more sentences, like, and at some point you're like, this is so easy for me. Like, okay, you're complaining. It's so easy for you. Like, that's like, I should have such problems, right? Anyway, so good. And the other one I'm using, which I recently picked up, and I've only really gone through the first chapter, is Easy Japanese. This is by Tuttle, I believe. Tuttle, and the author is Emiko Konomi. That's how she writes it, but I'm sure in Japanese she would say Konomi Emiko. But this is more a line of a textbook. You get dialogues. The other one is just sentences. They're not dialogues. They're not two people talking to each other. It's just a bunch of sentences. This one, you get dialogues. And you're getting vocabulary. Although at some point, like, I think she overloads me with the vocabulary. Like this page, for example. Look at this page. Like, 2 pages full of vocabulary? Really? 2 pages full of vocabulary? Like, what am I going to do with that? I have to learn it. I have to put that to memory. You know how long that's going to take me? You know how boring of a task that is? You know how difficult of a task that is? And now I can't progress. I can't move forward, because I can't read her dialogues. I can't implement her grammar, because I haven't learned the vocabulary that she's using in those exercises for me to understand what she's saying. So, like, that's my pet peeve with these language books. They give you too much vocabulary at one time. Just give me a lot less. The book will be more effective. You'll be a more effective, it'll be more effective pedagogy, instruction, teaching if you give me less. Less is more when it comes to language learning, right? Once I have the grammatical tools, then it's on me. And I will take it upon myself to start reading more and increasing my vocabulary because I know that once I do that, like my language, my grammar is going to expand. It's going to explode because I have the tools to start plug and play. Like, oh, I can take this word and put it into this structure, and now I can take this other verb and put it into the same structure, and now I can say a completely different thing that I couldn't have said like yesterday. And the more words you have, more vocabulary, the more you can do with the structures you know. But with this, it's like, no, here, learn these 40 words. I'm like, go to hell. Anyway, again, my pet peeve. But other than that, it's a good book. The instruction is good. The exercises are good. The vocabulary gives you is useful. It's good. It's just like it's too much of it at one time at some point. So yeah. So to me, this is a much better way to go. And if you're a self-learner, like as long as you can, like, it doesn't get too tedious for you, or if it does, just put it down and go to your other sources, go to YouTube, do something, and then come back to it and keep going, keep chugging along. All right, that's it. That's my video. I hope this was useful. I hope I didn't say anything too wrong. And sayonara. I said sayonara without clicking